18-4 in classical games, something like 15-2 in rapid games. Shirov's had a tough time over his career dealing with both Vichy and with Kasparov, and we'll see if Vichy can continue his Gibraltar Shake-Off tour, where he's trying to show the world that he's still very much a force. Won his first 2 games in the Zurich Chess Challenge in great style, checkmated Levon Aronian, then outplayed Anish Giri with the black pieces. Anand in the lead, he's being pursued by Nakamura. Anand has 4 out of 4. And Hikaru Nakamura, who is facing Vladimir Kramnik today, has 3 out of 4. If you're wondering why do they have 4 out of 4 after 2 games, it's because the rapid games count double. You can score 2 points there, and then later is going to be a blitz tournament where a victory is worth 1 point. So the tournament situation is Anand 4 out of 4, Nakamura 3 out of 4, Kramnik 2 out of 4, and then Giri, Aronian and Shirov all on 1 out of 4 or half out of 2, however you feel like counting it. So far in the openings, no big surprises, but let's start a little opening tour. Gotta love the openings. 1 second. So in the Nakamura-Kramnik game, we have a line that Kramnik might have bad memories of because he lost this against certain Yu Yangyi, if I do remember correctly, and I tend to. So the good old anti-Berlin d3, bishop c5, bishop c6, dc. This is a topical line. Knight bd2, bishop e6. This is Kramnik's favorite setup. We've seen plenty of castles followed by knight d7 recently as well. But Kramnik likes to not determine his king yet and put his bishop out in the open before he wants to go knight to d7. White tries to use that. He first castles, waiting for knight d7. And now if black were to get one more move, let's say f6, to stabilize his pawn chain, he wouldn't really have any particular problems. Therefore white strikes with a move that looks a bit funny at first sight. Knight b3, this is not the square you typically want your knight on. It's much more likely to end up on c4 in these lines. But after knight b3, black faces a bit of a dilemma. He can put his bishop to b6, which happened in the game, but that allows knight g5, and this bishop is trapped. You have to give it up for a knight, thereby white no longer has to deal with the opponent having 2 bishops. And the alternative is bishop to e7, which has also been seen in practice, but that, amongst other things, allows the move knight to a5, which is a little awkward. So, a theory discussion here between Nakamura and Kramnik. Nakamura has a plus score in classical games against Kramnik, one of the very few out there that has achieved that. Has been a difficult opponent, but their score is by no means one-sided. Both sides have gotten their wins in. They're blitzing out the opening, knight g5, bishop takes b3, knight f8 is also a move here, a takes b, f6, inviting this knight to jump onto e6, but that might be a one-way trip, because after queen e7, it's sort of unlikely the knight is ever going to get out. Therefore, Nakamura, without thinking, retreats his knight, goes knight f3. Now, the structure is clarified. Black no longer has the 2 bishops, both sides have a double pawn, but the white double pawn is sort of nicer than the black double pawn. And white, what he wants to do long term is go king h1, f4, either exchange this pawn and then create some sort of attack on the king side, or take on e5 and provoke a weakness here. So to my mind, white is a little bit better here, but the position is simplified. Kramnik will put his knight on the best square on e6, and I'm pretty sure he has checked this in his home lab more than once. Let's see what else we got. We got Vishy Anand with white against Alexei Shirov. And this one is not a Berlin, believe it or not. This one is a old-fashioned 3a6. Shirov, I'm not sure if he's played the Berlin, but he's much more of a classical Ruy Lopez player. a6, bishop a4, knight to f6, and he has a lot of experience with systems like castles b5, bishop b3, bishop c5, or maybe even the open Spanish. Vishy doesn't want any part of it. He goes for the move 5d3 here. which is less popular than its cousin. Its cousin is the line castles, bishop e7, and now d3. Now that this bishop has committed itself to e7, people like playing that, and this is arguably as popular as the mainline rook e1 now. There's some differences with 5d3, however. First of all, d3 allows the bishop to go to c5. You could play this like an anti-Berlin d3 bishop c5, and white could even take here, bishop c6, dc6, and we would get the same position as in the Kramnik-Nakamura game, Nakamura-Kramnik, sorry, except with the pawn on a6 instead of a7, which is not a big achievement for black. But you could also start with b5, bishop b3, and then put this bishop on c5, thereby putting it on a more active square than e7. I'm surprised Shirov didn't choose that, or not that surprised, but that's what I do. But Shirov used another opportunity to make sense of the bishop still being on f8. He's going for the system with d6 followed by g6, and he wants to put this bishop on g7. c3, g6, castles, bishop g7, knight b2, castles, rook to e1. Now, all of this has been played quite a bit. I thought white was supposed to be a little better here, but I've never analyzed this in great detail. I'm not an e4 player, and I've never really liked this play with d6, g6. But Shirov, Mr. Fire on board, tries to play as aggressively as you can in this position. He goes knight h5 to prepare f5, which looks very nice. Knight f1, he's played f5, but there are some problems with it, if I'm not mistaken. White gains a lot of time for development with moves like bishop g5. After ef, you gotta be very careful if you can really go gf, because here, let's say check, king h8, knight to g5, all of a sudden this knight is under attack. There's a looming check on f7. So this is very, very risky play by Alexei Shirov. And let's hope for him it doesn't backfire, because Vichy has been crushing him in the past, really. I don't think there's a better word. 17-4 is a pretty tremendous score at this level. Shirov also troubles against Kasparov. No troubles against Kramnik, where he has a plus score. It's funny how these things work sometimes. Those are guys who have played each other over and over again, of course, over the last 20 years. And Anand has come out on top against Shirov. Let's get to our third game. The game between Levon Aronian and Anish Giri. Both guys probably not too thrilled with how the event has gone for them so far, but probably also not too interested to show all their openings 1 month before the candidates tournament. They do want to qualify against Meg, to play a match against Magnus Carlsen and crush him. And Aronian, Giri, Nakamura and Anand are all playing in the candidates. Hasn't affected or hasn't held back Anand or Nakamura, but could be that Levon and Anish, who are very dependent, or dependent is the wrong word, but who are very strong in the opening and do a lot of damage with their preparation, suffer a bit from the fact that they can't really show all their weapons, or they choose not to show all their weapons in the Zurich tournament. Anyway, let's see what weapons they chose for this game. The Semi-Slav, one of my favorites by Anish Giri, who can play pretty much every opening. Bishop b4, dc4, bishop e7. We've seen it all from him, but for this one he goes for the Semi-Slav. Levon Aronian plays bishop g5 and h6, inviting the crazy complications after bishop h4, dc4. Aronian plays it more solidly. He takes on f6, parting with the bishop pair, but in turn forcing the black queen to go to a square where it doesn't really want to be, and gaining time for development. The main move here is e3 when white follows up with bishop d3, short castles, and sometimes e4. Aronian plays a different move, also well known to theory. He plays queen b3, covering this pawn, and one idea is to play e2 to e4 in one go. If you went e4 immediately, the problem would be that black takes and now gives a check on f on b4, which is very awkward to meet. You could retreat this knight, but then black has solved all his problems, and king e2 has been played by some brave guys, but it is a little hard to believe you want to put your king here. So queen b3 has the idea of preparing that e4 move without allowing any nasty checks. A lot of theory here. a5 is a move, knight d7 is a move, but the line chosen by Giri is I believe the main line, at least it's what I play as well, so I'm gonna assume this is the main line. Takes knight to d7, getting ready to meet e4 with e5. Therefore, Aronian now switches plans, doesn't want to go e4 anymore. He says he's achieved that black had to give up his center by playing dc4, and therefore he goes for more humble development, plays e3, g6. Typical setup to fianchetto this bishop. There's other moves here. You could think about e5 playing more aggressively, trying to open the center already. g6 looks very natural, but now we see Levon Aronian's idea. Maybe he thought, you know what, this tournament hasn't gone well, I have 1 out of 4. Who needs all this preparation for the candidates anyway? I'm gonna use a little idea here against Anish Giri, see if I can hurt him in the opening. Knight e4, the queen drops back to e7. Now if black got one more move to play bishop g7 followed by castles, he'd be in excellent shape. Therefore, white has to strike while the iron is hot. He goes for knight to e5. Trying to figure out what that's about. If black were to play bishop g7, apologies, my best guess is he wants to go f4 and establish his knight here. Whenever you take it fe, all of a sudden the colleague on e4 will become a very dominant piece. So this could be a little unpleasant. Also note that the black pawn is on h6. If your pawn is on h7 and such structures, then you can always play f6 and fight this knight. But with the pawn on h6, no can-do'sville, because the pawn on g6 will always be hanging whenever you try to play this f6 move. So that's a typical feature of these positions, knight e5. Another move that was possible would be knight takes e5, d takes e5, but same story. This knight gains access to a lot of juicy squares. And therefore Giri chooses a third continuation that looks very sensible, is also in his style. He gets rid of the queens, goes queen b4 check. He did do that, right? Let me just confirm. Yeah, he went queen b4 check, queen takes, bishop takes, check, king to e2. Now with the queens off the board, it doesn't really matter to keep the king in the center. It looks quite natural. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Black has the two bishops. As usual in this line, he also has some trouble developing his c8 bishop. And if white were to finish his development, get in g3, bishop g2, then start advancing on the queen side. Before black gets in, let's say c5 or b6 and bishop b7, then white will be a little better. Knight takes e5, d e5 is still structurally not very pleasant for black. So I think Levon's shown an interesting idea in this game. Not sure what Giri is gonna do. Retreating this bishop looks kind of logical to keep an eye on f6. Because, yeah, there's no very useful move anyway, and you can't castle due to takes, and a little fork. So bishop e7 looks like a normal move, but I like Aronian's opening treatment. I think he's a little better if he plays g3, followed by bishop g2 here. We'll see how that one goes. Let's go to Nakamura Kramnik. I don't know, I'm starting to get not only Berlin fatigue, but also anti-Berlin fatigue. It's not that these positions aren't interesting, they're actually very complex strategically. But we've seen so much of the structure with bishop c6, dc6, two pairs of minor pieces left. White is very, very slightly better, as I mentioned. What's going on today? Since it seems like I can't speak anyway, I'll read the chat a bit. There are no boards, Jan. Can you please check? I'm not quite sure what that means. I hope you got boards. And I'm right here talking to you. You can even see the guys on camera. There's Vishy Anand, Alexei Shirov, Anish Giri, as we discussed yesterday, I believe the best pound-by-pound player in the business. He's facing Levon Aronian. And we have... It's only 6 players. It shouldn't be that hard to me for me to figure out who's not in this picture. It is Hikaru Nakamura and Vladimir Kramnik. No Boris Gelfand and Alexander Morozevich today. They played a friendly match yesterday on Saturday. But they said, you know what, let's do one day. Today is Valentine's Day. I can't be bothered to play more chess against Morozevich. Boris Gelfand won that game. No, won the second game and thereby won that match 2.5, 1.5. But today it is only 3 games. It's the second day of the rapid event. It's going to be round 3 and 4. Round 3 is what we're looking at right now. Round 4 is starting at 6 p.m. Then tomorrow is going to be one more rapid game at 3 p.m. followed by a blitz tournament at 6 p.m. And that is the Zurich Chess Challenge. Right now Vishy Anand is in the lead. And just like last year, it looks like for now it's a race between Vishy Anand and Hikaru Nakamura. Last year Vishy Anand dominated the classical part of the event. Then Nakamura dominated the rapid part. They played a tiebreak, which Nakamura won. Let's see what's going on in Anand Shirov. Knight f1, f5. Anand went for knight g3. I lack theoretical knowledge here. I'd be very curious to see what happens after something like this, which I was showing earlier. Because you want to go gf5, but that runs into knight g5. Therefore, I guess you have to take with the bishop. Which, I don't know, might be playable for black. Bishop played knight g3, which probably is deep understanding way over my head. I'd be concerned to put the knight here because it allows this knight f4 jump, but probably black doesn't have time for it. Normally, if this knight comes here, you want to fight it with g3, or at least if you take it, you don't want your knight getting hit after e takes f4. So let me try to figure out what happens if he does put his knight on f4, which he didn't do, so I shouldn't spend too much time on it. Maybe ef5 is a problem. gf, and now maybe takes bishop f4, ef, and the knight jumps here. Yeah, this looks nice for white. So knight f4 was not to be feared, and Shirov played f takes e4, trying to open the position, open the f-file for his rook before Anand has all his pieces out. Then again, Anand can get all his pieces out with tempo with bishop g5. He's chosen not to do that. He's chosen to sacrifice material. This is escalating quickly. You could just recapture, but then, first of all, there's this knight f4 move again without the ef5 reply. There's also bishop g4 in the air. Therefore, Vishy decided to force the issue, gave a little check. King has to move because d5, de4, all of a sudden this pawn is pinned and gone. So king h8 is forced, and Vishy went for knight g5. Which, in fairness, I'm not sure if it's really a sacrifice. He is threatening knight f7 check, and he's still keeping tabs on the pawn on e4. So it's becoming sharp. Let's look at some moves. Knight takes g3, looks like an obvious move. H takes g3. And now I guess we have to defend against this family fork. Queen e7. I guess you recapture on e4 one way or another. I'd be tempted to go rook e4, to go to h4 and play for checkmate. I'm not sure if it hits home. It does look a little scary though. What else could black do? You could sacrifice, or you could jump to f4. That's what he played knight h5 for after all. But that allows knight f7, rook f7, bishop f7. In this position, I'm not sure actually if it's that bad. Let's say knight takes d3, rook takes e4, takes, black would have the two bishops and a pawn for the exchange. It's a similar material balance to what we've seen yesterday in, what was it, Aronian, Kramnik, Aronian. And yeah, it could be that white is a little better here, but I have a feeling this line is interesting. Maybe instead of knight takes c1, there's other moves. Knight c5, queen f6 or whatnot. Could be. Let's see how Shirov reacts, but this is already big decision time. Knight f4 or knight takes g3, both possible. I guess Vishy is not in book anymore, at least if we can trust the time management. Vishy, of course, one of the best prepared guys in the business, just like the two guys we see on camera there. But he spent a bit more than 10 minutes, which normally you don't do in a rapid game if you still know your opening. The time control used, for those of you who missed yesterday, is 40 minutes per game plus 10 seconds increment per move. So it's a bit of a mix between classical shorter rapid games and, no, not classical rapid games, I shouldn't say that, that sounds confusing. Between faster rapid time control and closer to the classical control. The idea is that, yeah, there is the a big discussion going on that classical games are too long. Who wants to watch chess for 6 hours in a row? It's all Berlin theory anyway, so let's shorten, not my opinion, so let's shorten the time control and make it 40 minutes plus 10 seconds. So a game lasts as long as a football match, as a basketball match, and see how that goes. And yeah, I'm torn. Like, I don't think classical chess is boring, but I'm probably also not the target audience because I'm very interested in all the theoretical crap and yeah, whatever is going on. But I do understand that it's a bit of a time commitment to watch a chess game for 6 hours with so little physical action. So I find it kind of an interesting experiment to see what happens if we make a chess game last 1.5 hours. How good is the level of play? How much is the interest? How do the players like it and so on? It is a very, interesting idea they're pursuing here. I think it takes some guys a bit more adjusting than I thought. Like, I thought the games would be of a very high level, but we've seen some of the players struggling, especially Levan Aronian getting checkmated in the first game in 19 moves. That doesn't typically happen to him. So we'll see if the players adjust, if the public likes it, what the numbers look like, and so on and so forth, and if this format has a future. It could very well be. I'm a bit of a fan of the older time control, but normally whenever there's change, people will whine about it, and of course the time control has been shortened and shortened over the years anyway. I just took a peek at the chat. That's a chat on chess24.com if you're wondering, not if you're watching this live on YouTube. I don't follow that chat. And people are praising Shirov's preparation. Could very well be. Shirov still is in book. He hasn't spent much time, and he has indeed played the move knight f4, which implies, is that the word? Nah. Includes an exchange sacrifice. Vishy could go knight to f7 check, and he has done that, grabbing the exchange. Shirov took it, bishop takes f7, and he's thrown in an intermediate move, queen to f8. I was looking at knight takes d3 immediately, but this could very well be stronger. First of all, getting rid of this bishop, and another point is after bishop b3, I'm not sure how he wants to take. Both e takes d and knight takes d3 look possible. What I was going to say is after knight takes d3, there's no rook e4 because the f2 pawn would be under attack. Still, it's entirely possible he wants to take with the pawn with a very sharp position, but I don't mind black's chances here. At the moment he has 2 pawns for the exchange, and even if the d3 pawn drops, let's say bishop c4, then he does have very active pieces. The 2 bishops, something like d5, bishop takes. I'm not sure about knight takes d3. But just to illustrate, such a position with the 2 bishops, with the active pawn center, with the pawn for the exchange, with his knight being misplaced, I do not think white is better. I think this is absolutely playable for black. And yeah, we gotta commend Shirov for his good opening play in this one against one of his nemesises. Is there a plural for nemesises? Not sure. Anyway, against a guy who's been beating him up in the past quite a bit against Vishy Anand. He's looked confident, and I think he's gotten a position to his liking with a material imbalance, active play, still plenty of time on the clock. Shirov looking good so far in this Zurich event. He's the underdog. He hasn't been in the super tournament circuit for a bit now, but of course he is one of the most creative players out there, and guys who, like me, are a little older will remember all his masterpieces from the 90s and 2000s. Mr. Fire on board, looking good against the Tiger from Madras. I really don't know if I can keep using that since the city is now called Chennai. Vishy fans out there, let me know, what is his nickname nowadays? Do we call him the Tiger from Chennai? Just a tiger? I don't know. Then we got Anish Giri. I'm not sure he has a nickname. We need nicknames for these guys. Anish Giri is slightly worse, that's what I thought out of the opening. He's played this move bishop e7 just to cover the f6 square. Aronian went f4. Not sure you needed f4 actually. Why not g3? Well, maybe he disliked the idea of black taking at some point and he wanted to make sure he can recapture with f takes e5. I'm a little surprised, I'm not sure he needed to spend that tempo. f4, b6, tactics. How does that work if we take? Ah, now I got it. Bishop b7, attacking this guy, and I want to take here. But turns out that after bishop takes e4, this knight does not have a great future. Unlike Anish Giri, this knight is not going places anymore. So you can't take, and with that little subtlety, Giri manages to solve his main problem, finish the development of his light square bishop. Aronian plays slowly king f2, freeing the way for his bishop. But now after bishop b7, I think black is fine. Now c5 is looming. I'm not sure, I have a feeling f4 might be to blame for what's happened here. Aronian played rook d1. And has Giri made a move? No, Giri's still pondering after rook d1. Rook d1 is directed against c5, I would guess, because after c5 this rook could come in very handily. Is that English? No, almost English. Along the d file after something like knight takes d7. You can't recapture with the king because of dc5 check. Even though knight d7 might not be best because of bishop e4. Might be smarter to react with the immediate bishop b5 using that pin. Anyway, rook d1, Giri could just mirror that move, going rook d8, defending his knight and saying, you know what, I still want to go c5 one of those days. And I also want to prepare short castles. Don't want you to take here. What I believe you shouldn't do is take on e5 when both d5 and fe5 just leave white with too nice a structure. People are saying Giri's nickname is the artist because he likes to draw. It's clever. I don't agree with the premise, but that is pretty clever. Didn't they call Kramnik the painter? Back in the days he gave this interview. By the way, there's a great interview with Kramnik on Chess24. I read it, I think, last night. Lots of interesting stuff in there about, chess politics, about his match against Topalov, how he feels about the candidates, who he thinks is gonna win. Always interesting to read Kramnik interviews, so check that out if you haven't already. The most exciting position, at least by the looks of it, is the one between Vishy Anand and Alexei Shirov. They've played this e takes d3, bishop c4, and I mentioned earlier, even if you do something simplistic like d5 and now just chop this bishop off, finish your development, bishop e6. I thought black was okay, but okay doesn't mean he's better or winning. I believe it's a roughly equal position. White is an exchange up after all, and he can develop some pieces. Go bishop e3, then rook d1. See what happens. But with a pawn for the exchange and an active center, I thought Shirov should be fine. What else could he do after bishop c4? If you go bishop f5, trying to hang on to that pawn, I believe this goal will not be achieved, and such a position all of a sudden would be much, much better for white, because black would lose his two bishops. The opposite color bishops here are not a drawing factor at all, but they help the side with the initiative. Here white with his extra rook would wrestle the initiative away from black very quickly, also with his better bishop. So bishop f5, not a very good idea. I still think d5, followed by just taking on d3. Looks natural. After d5, white doesn't have time to go bishop f4, because then black... actually, I was going to show dc4 and show how nice this pawn chain is, but it's actually even stronger to go ef4 with a double attack against both white pieces. So I'm not going to be able to do it. He would have to take on d3, and Shirov has played d5. Bishop takes d3, will be blitzed out by Vishy. We'll see. I'm reading 2 pawns for the exchange plus the passed pawn on d3. I'll take black, fair enough, but the passed pawn on d3 has just disappeared. So now it's only 1 pawn for the exchange. I still think black is okay, but I do not think he's better. Some questions if Kramnik is in trouble. I don't think he's in trouble. It's a very slow structure. Both sides are very familiar with from both sides of the board. Most top players do speak Berlin as a second language these days. And yeah, I don't think he's in trouble. I think he knows what he's doing. As mentioned, I believe white is a tiny bit better here, always, because of his slightly healthier pawn structure. Like, this is not a bad double pawn. In general, whenever you can go a takes b3, even though it does give you this double pawn, it also increases your mobility, because a pawns, they have a little secret, which is they're not as good as other pawns. And the reason is there is no a file. So the h pawn, for example, can't capture to the right. All he can do is capture to the left. And then if he makes it to g3, like here, or b3, all of a sudden this is a full-fledged pawn that controls two squares ahead of him, instead of the one square, the one measly square it was controlling from a2. So a takes b3 or h takes g3, there's a reason you see people so happily going for these double pawns, because it does allow you to control more space. I've been arguing for a long time that the a and the h pawns, they should not be worth like a full point like other pawns. They should be worth like 0.80 or something. I'm not sure if computer programmers are doing that, but these guys are inferior pawns. They have less mobility. While the pawn on d5 on d7 was a full-fledged pawn, so him having to go to c6 out away from the center is not something you want to do. From d6 or d5 and controls two central squares. From c6 it only controls one central square, blocks his colleague on c7. So that is a problem, and that's the reason why I believe that white is very slightly better. However, black only has good pieces left. He has this bishop, which is active, can be exchanged at any time. The knight is on the perfect square for the structure on e6, controlling everything there is to control, above all the f4 and d4 squares. All the black rooks, and yeah, everything is right in the black position, so his disadvantage is very, very small. And I should probably jump ahead for about 500 moves, because something has happened. After bishop d4, while I was busy explaining the value of a pawns, Nakamura was busy grabbing the a pawn, which I should probably have considered, but I was very impressed with myself and my theory on these pawns. Bishop takes d4, knight takes d4. You don't want to go e takes d4, first of all strategically, and secondly because of rook takes a7. But knight takes d4, queen d7, rook d7, and Nakamura took on a7, which of course is not free. The pawn on c2 is also dropping. He could have played a solid move like knight e3, and the status quo remains unchanged, whatever, a6 or rook a8. And once again, we have this very solid structure. White has a slightly better structure. Black has a knight on d4. Nothing much happening, but Nakamura took rook a7, knight c2, rook b7, trying to take as many pawns as he can get his hands on. Kramnik took on d3, and I guess Nakamura will keep feasting, going rook takes c7. Is he better though? If rook takes b3, then rook c6. At least he'd be a pawn up, even though even here I think black has excellent drawing chances. But can we do better? Can we start with knight d4? Now this pawn is defended, protected, and rook takes b3 is a threat. So, well, if you go b4, I believe we can just hit this guy and intend to eat it at the first opportunity. Could be other moves. The black pieces are so active. Maybe rook f7 is a good move, just getting rid of the only active white piece. That actually looks like a good move. I don't think there's any trouble for black here. Now Nakamura has gone for direct action, but I believe Kramnik had him covered and was ready for this chain of events. I believe the position is just equal. After rook takes c7, knight to d4 back, I don't see any serious winning attempts for white. His other rook is too passive, and if he goes after pawns, let's say knight a5, let's say we get something like this, not a forced line at all, but just to illustrate. Such a position can never be won by white, because black is just super active. You go rook a8, rook a2, even if we don't win the material back, which we would here with rook a3. But even if you go here, there's just absolutely nothing white can ever do, so it's just a draw because of the activity of the rooks. If this pawn advances, it can always get capture one day, you can't really remove this rook from the defense of the f2 pawn. So this is just, yeah, not even the tiniest white advantage. Story changes a bit if white manages to get his rook to f3, for example, defending this pawn from a more active outpost, but as long as his rook stays passive, black doesn't have to be afraid of any simplifications, even if he's temporarily pawned down. So it's just equal. Let's see what's going on in the Shirov game. Bishop takes d3. Shirov decided not to take on d3, but to expand with e4. I'm reading in the chat, that's a blunder. The computer, I guess, doesn't like it. Harsh to call it a blunder, but maybe there is some trickery. That's, I guess, what people are referring to. e4, if this bishop goes here, let's say, which looks natural. Now the threat is bishop takes f4 and queen takes d5. So the move you want to play is bishop e6, just to cover this pawn. And I guess the blunder portion comes, let me verify with Mr. Computer so I don't blunder all the pieces. Yeah, the computer gives knight takes e4 here, and if d takes e4, rook takes e4. Maybe that's what people were pointing out. And all of a sudden, it looks ridiculous for white. After rook d8, he's material down, and black is active. But queen f1, it seems like white is winning material back. You can't keep both the bishop and the knight. Even though this is only the start of the mess now that I'm looking at the position. Knight h3 takes... I'm looking at the computer more than at the position, frankly. The lines are spitting out here because I wanted to know if this works. This looks like total chaos, but the computer likes white. Still, I would not call the move e4 a blunder. In a rapid game, all of this, which we've just seen, is a total mess. And Shirov wants to, yeah, play a more complicated position, more to his liking than takes and bishop takes e6, which was the sober way to play it. Let's see if it backfires though. Vishy, of course, no stranger to tactics, and after bishop c2, bishop e6, he's very capable of entering these complications with knight e4 and rook e4, if he considers them favorable. We shall find out soon. That's the good thing about Rapid. We don't have to wait that long to find stuff out. Like, there's no 2-hour break after move 40. It's 40 minutes for the game, 10 seconds per move, and that's it. So on the first day, one game took around 1 hour, 30 minutes, a bit more, I believe, which is like a football game without the halftime break. I don't know, I don't watch much football. It always feels terribly long, especially if you go there, standing there in the rain, like Hamburg loses 2-1 or 2-0. Nothing really happens for 90 minutes, and you're supposed to get very excited about it, but probably it's a bit harder to explain chess to a football fan than football to chess fans, so I guess I'm kind of alone with that opinion. I do like my basketball, as you guys know. So e4 has been played, and Vishy is wondering where to put his bishop. Bishop f1 is also moved, but then you lose these tactical tricks which you had after bishop c2. And after bishop f1, bishop e6, I quite like black's position. Once again, good compensation, active pieces. So I feel... well, I'm looking at the computer now, so I'm very biased, but it looks like objectively Vishy has to go for this bishop c2, bishop e6, knight takes e4 with fire on board. Let's see if he does it. The Kramnik-Nakamura game, which we see on camera there, I should really call it Nakamura-Kramnik because Nakamura is white. Nakamura's tried b4, he hasn't taken on c7. Which I'm wondering if he might regret that. If this knight retreats, just keeps this pawn alive, tending to go rook d4. Only black can be better here. You could also just go for good old-fashioned activity that's similar to the lines I was looking at earlier, where once again white can never be better here because he has this very passive rook, and he has to be careful about equalizing. So Nakamura's forcing the issue, at the very least with rook takes a7, doesn't seem to yield any dividends. He could have gone knight e3, continued to play slowly with an equal position, but these mass pawn murders after rook a7, knight c2, rook b7, rook d3 don't seem to have brought white any advantage. au contraire, I think he is slightly worse now after either rook to a8 or knight to e6. I like rook a8 better, just because this knight... Oops, not rook b8. Just because this knight is so powerful on d4. We'll see how it goes, but of course, draw is a favorite here. Aronian Giri. What has happened between you two gentlemen? Aronian has a very good score against Giri in classical chess. Even though these victories are a little dated, I believe he's beaten him 4 times, never lost. Then again, Giri is young, he's 21 years old, so he started playing all these guys when he was like 15, 16, and against a number 2 in the world in Levan Aronian in his prime a couple of years ago. Oh, that sounds like he's not in his prime anymore. I didn't mean to say that, but Levan Aronian was a clear number 2 in the world a couple of years ago, and he crushed Giri in some very, very nice games. I was just, recording a bunch of Aronian games with Artur Yusupov, who was a big fan, working on a series for the candidates, and he's had some fantastic games, that Levan guy. Bishop f3, Giri decided to go c5. Not much I can tell you, this looks boring, and it looks like a lot of pieces will be exchanged, and we're gonna get a peaceful outcome, something like this. And white on paper is a little better, because his rook is more active, but there's not enough weaknesses in the black position. He will go a5, king g7, h5, king f6, sit and wait, and it will end in a draw. And that line looks almost forced to me after c5. Black has managed to free his position, so white has to act. Well, how else could you act? You could take on c5 immediately, but then knight e5, fe, bishop e4 once again leads to opposite color bishops, and nothing to talk about. Slightly worse version than the one we've just seen for white, but still very equal. Well, now white is allowed c5. He doesn't have time to keep the tension or do anything exciting. If he let that go like knight f6 check, you could do that actually, but it also is not incredibly entertaining. Takes, and now black is ready to go. C takes d4, simplifying even further. I think this position could be playable for white because there are some weaknesses on the light squares on the queen side, but I do not believe that you could ever be better here with white either. Black is just too solid. He goes h5, king g7. You have this weakness. Black is fine. Now I'm expecting simplifications and a handshake here soon after takes and d takes c5. Let's see if Levan Aronian can come up with anything better and keep the game going. But I do not think so. And Vichy has not played bishop c2. He's gone for bishop f1, which is the square closer to your king. So if you don't believe these complications favor you, or if you don't consider knight takes e4, then this is a much more natural choice to bring the bishop closer to his king, keeping an eye on g2, getting out of the way. But it does not pose Shirov any direct tactical problems, so Shirov can now play the move he wanted to play. I would guess bishop to e6, and then start bringing pieces over to the king side with very good compensation for the exchange. I believe Shirov can still be happy here. And as mentioned, the computer was quite happy for white with bishop c2, followed by knight takes e4, and entering that mess. Bishop f1, not so sure. I think black's position is easier to play. At least it's easier to draw lots of arrows. And for white, it's some tricky choices. Do you want to take on f4? Because then you get rid of the scary knight, but after queen takes f4, there's problems on f2. I don't know. I like black's position here, gotta say. What do we have on camera? We have Nakamura wondering, what have I done to my position? Did I need to do this? A lot of requests in the chat. Please make the top bar on the side go auto height. I don't know what that means, but whatever. I'm not sure, but I'll pass it on. People are saying it's too big. I quite like it that you see where you're at. Still I'll read through the chat. Always looks like I'm looking out of the window, but my screen is to my right here, so forgive me for not staring into the camera for a second. I'm just catching up what you guys are telling me. A lot of action in the chat. People are watching this. People are not enjoying this Valentine's Day. They're saying, we all know that's a holiday that's been invented by women to make us buy them stuff. We're gonna watch some chess instead. Having said all that, to both of the women watching, happy Valentine's Day, and everything I just said was very much tongue-in-cheek. There's some discussion if the chess world needs a new time control. We don't know. I think the chess world needs more unity when it comes to classical. That's the problem, that every tournament is a different time control. We've seen Magnus Carlsen and many others over the last year losing on time because they didn't know the time control. Sometimes it's no increment in the first 40 moves, sometimes there's extra time after move 60, sometimes there's this, sometimes there's that. So it has been very confusing, and I believe this format they play in Zurich is interesting. I'm not sure if it's going to manage to replace classical time control or if it's going to find a place to stay as a rapid time control. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, to me it's been less about the time control, and if you talk to the players, they don't care if it's 90 minutes plus 30 seconds and then 1 hour for the rest, or if there's no time control, if there's no increment before move 40. All they're saying is, just give me the same time control in every super tournament so I can figure that out. But everyone likes playing rapid and blitz, so I do not think that is a problem. The big question is if the time control should be shortened for classical, if it will be shortened, and if that's going to happen anytime soon. Shirov's played g5. That's a surprise. I was expecting him to bring his bishop out, but he just wants to make sure Vichy can never take on f4, because after g5, bishop f4, now he has gf4 with menacing pawn chain. Problem with g5 is it loses control of the h5 square, and if you're Vichy, you could use that immediately by going knight h5, his knight on g3. Let's face it, was a bit of an idiot, and it was restricted by the pawn on g6, so I'd be very happy to be able to try to exchange it and put it on an active square. Knight h5, and all of a sudden I like white's position. Now you can try to play g3, get rid of this knight, can exchange that one, and really look at this knight on g3. It had zero career prospects, never finished his studies, got stuck there, might have to move back into the basement to h1 one day, had absolutely nothing to do. If it ever went to e2, it would allow knight d3. So to play g5 and give this a juicy square like h5, I think is a serious mistake by Shirov. I think he should have played bishop e6 with a very nice position. But after g5, if Vichy decides to jump here, I'm gonna abandon Team Shirov and say Vichy is doing very well. Achilles Nankunar Nagara is saying, I wished Vichy had played d4 and went for the aggressive Moscow gambit. Well, you need your opponent to play an aggressive opening to allow the Moscow gambit. Shirov has an active repertoire, so you normally get a fight no matter what you do. If you go e4 or d4, I don't think this position is that boring. But after bishop f1, g5 I think is a serious inaccuracy, allowing knight h5 when the tables have, well, maybe not turned, because white wasn't like losing or anything. But I think Vichy all of a sudden is seriously better. If you can get rid of this dumb piece, it's really your worst piece, then you're in very good shape. Let's see if he does it or if he chooses something else, but I am confused. Levon has chosen something else. He does not want to go home just yet. He wants to keep the game going. Kudos to him. c5. He did not go for these simplifications, which I have talked about. With knight d7 and dc5. He played the move knight g3. And Giri decided to take on e5. He could also take on f3. But I guess it's going to come down to a similar thing. Knight e5. de5. And Giri does not want to exchange his bishops, because after bishop f3, king f3, this knight could come back to e4. The structure could be a little awkward. So instead he's played bishop a6. The same still applies, the knight can come back to e4. But his reasoning is, my bishop is better than your bishop, and maybe I can use it to create opposite colored bishops one of these days. Right here, right now, I think you want to go king g7 just to never have to think about knight f6 check and then take it from there. I guess it's still about equal now that this bishop is active. And black has a pawn majority on the queen side. It's not going to run anywhere anytime soon. But I have a hard time believing that Levon has an advantage here. Still, kudos for, choosing to continue the game in an unbalanced position with knight g3 instead of simplifying, which he could have done. Not happy with the draw. A lot of discussion about the candidates in the chat. Who's the favorite? I don't have a clue. I do agree that it's the most mixed field we've had in a long time, the most even field. Very hard to name a favorite. Now, yeah, Vishy's made a move. He's played another very interesting move. Not knight h5, which I liked, but it doesn't run away. But he said, you know what, if you spend time on a move like g5, I'm going to undermine your center. I'm worried about nothing. I'm going to play c4, trying to get rid of this stronghold on e4. And if I can bring my knight to e4, I'll be happy with that as well. A very interesting choice. What's going on? If d takes c4, white is just much better after both bishop takes here or knight takes here. The question is, can black jump into action, sacrifice more stuff? Let's say knight e5, c takes d5. Knight d3 now. Let's go bishop g4 first. Not sure if this works, but it looks very Shirovian. Just, throwing caution to the wind and activating all the pieces to the max. Say queen c2. I need computer help. Queen c2, knight h3 check, boom. Gh3, knight f3, and black is fine. So knight h3, the computer gives king h1, knight f2, king g1, knight h3 with a draw actually. But yeah, it goes to show there's still a lot of tricks hidden in the position. Knight e5 takes bishop g4. What do you want to do, Mr. Computer? Well, the computer gives bishop e2 with a bit of an edge, but that's a very hard move to pull off bishop e2, allowing knight takes e2, knight takes e2, and knight d3. Ooh, here I'd be very scared. Computer likes white after rook f1, but that's not something you want to do. Allow this knight into here, allow this pin. Scary. So Shirov has another chance to jump back into the game maybe and make it a mess with knight e5. Not that he was ever out of the game. I just really like knight h5 here. And c4. And I think he has to go for it, because if he goes d takes c4, he's just worse. He also doesn't have time to go bishop e6 anymore. Let's say c takes d, and if bishop d5, just... It's many good moves, but just this, for example, takes and takes with pretty much a winning position and exchange up. So not going to be able to do it. He has to go for broke with knight e5, bishop g4, which leads to complications. So this is still going to be interesting. There's a question, what chess engine does Chess24 use? It says Stockfish 6 here on my screen, so I believe that's the one. There's probably a new Stockfish out there, Stockfish 7. Guess we're going to change it to that. But for premium members, you get the Cloud engine, which is much stronger than the non-premium engine. So yeah, I think this is Stockfish 6 on my screen. It's depth 23 at the moment. But yeah, I have to admit, I'm no longer a huge expert on how to pronounce the word huge, but also not on chess engines. Ever since they got so strong, it feels like it doesn't matter so much which one you use. It's more personal preference, which one you're used to, where you can understand the evaluation best. Me, yeah, I've always been a Houdini guy, because he always gives like an evaluation of something like 0-0, so I feel safer, while Stockfish is more opinionated, gives stronger evaluations. But if you're working with Houdini, Komodo, Stockfish, I really don't think it makes a difference. They're all so strong, and if your engine has 3310 or 3280 or 3265, it's very hard to say, or it's very hard to tell the difference. For a human, it's more about understanding, like, where could he have weaknesses, what does the evaluation mean. Like with Stockfish, sometimes if he gives 0.50, it's not the end of the world. If Houdini gives 0.50, it's normally quite serious. But yeah, I don't have strong opinions on it. All the Stockfishes are very strong, all the Houdinis are, Komodos are. A lot of good engines out there. c4, Sheriff took, didn't go for the engine supported line, knight e5 followed by bishop g4. And now I'm Team Vichy all the way again after both bishop takes c4 and anything takes e4. But let's think about it for a bit. Knight takes e4 comes to mind. Once again, the idiot knight vacating its square, hitting the pawn on g5. This pawn is still on crease. I don't really see a good move. I guess you still have to activate something like knight d4, probably knight e5 again, keeping this pawn, playing to jump in here. If knight takes g5, at least this knight gets here. And ever since that famous game, Karpov-Kasparov, I wish it was, I knew where it was. It was in Seville, the Kraken game, where Kasparov sacrificed a pawn and then installed his knight on d3. I've been traumatized by a knight arriving here. I guess white is better after takes and rook f1, but I'm not sure we want to unleash the Kraken and allow it into d3. So maybe here it's time to take on f4, get rid of one of these creatures and claim an advantage. Another move would be rook takes e4, leaving this jump open. And now with knight e5, I want to jump here, but I'm afraid I'm going to blunder the house after bishop g4. So that is not what we should be doing. We should instead grab pawns, bishop takes c4. And the computer likes white, but I'm not that sure. This is still a very active position for black. Rook d8 or rook e8 coming, all these pieces working at max capacity, max power. Therefore, yeah, it's not easy. The computer gives white a significant edge after knight takes e4 or bishop takes c4, but the position is still a mess, especially in a rapid game. Anything can happen. Valentine's Day. Anand has 17 minutes left. Shirov has 12 minutes plus and 12 seconds. So no huge. Why can't I pronounce huge? So hard to say that silent H. No big time trouble coming up just yet, but the clock is ticking away. In the Nakamura-Kramnik game, Nakamura, after b4, was probably happy to see Kramnik play knight e6, which is a good move covering this pawn. But rook a8 looked even more challenging. And after knight e6, rook c1, rook a8, b5, Nakamura understood he's not better, he should get rid of some pawns. Typical defensive technique. If you're slightly worse, in this case because of the activity, exchange some pawns, so things can't be too bad. Rook a8, f3, he does not want to get checked on d1, even though it's not really checkmate. But f3, just a good stabilizing move, improving the pawn structure. h5, similarly creating a luft for this king should it ever be needed and stopping white from going h5. But now it's just an almost symmetrical structure, almost symmetrical piece arrangements and just an equal position. King h2, knight f4. This white knight covers the entry square on d2. I wouldn't be surprised if it ended in a move repetition, something like this. Then again, I'm always looking for move repetitions. While the players have been showing fighting spirit, they've been avoiding those left and right. So not saying this will happen. And rook c5 could be asking though. You want to repeat moves? I don't know. We'll find out. People are trying to explain me how to pronounce huge. It's a very hard word to pronounce for me. Don't know why. I also don't like people whose first name is Hugh. Similar problems. There is a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode discussing that, but it's tough to pronounce. Being asked if I'm gonna crush John Bartholomew. I'm afraid not actually. I'll try to crush him, but I've looked at some of his videos when I prepared for the match, which we then had to delay because of my technical problems, or the Chess24 technical issues. He's very, very good. He's very fast. Like in classical, I have a much higher rating, but in blitz, I've been dealing with confidence issues with blitz recently. I feel old and slow, not able to calculate anything. So I'm not sure if I'm going to crush him, but it's going to be an interesting match on, when is it? Thursday. I don't think boxers would say that. I think they'd have a little more self-confidence, trash-talking wise. Seth, nah, he's good. I'm old and washed up. Don't think I can win that fight. Not even getting paid, so I'm not sure why I'm doing this. And no, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm just kidding around. And the Indian fans are here to support Mr. Vishy. C4, D takes C4. Vishy has played knight takes E4, and Shirov, with his attacking instincts, has gone for knight E5. Preparing bishop G4. People are saying, come on Vishy, finish him. I don't think it's finishing time yet. I think it's a very unclear position. And Shirov, at least in a rapid game, has very good practical chances here. Because yeah, this is coming with tempo, and knight can come to D3. Bishop F4, G F4 is probably the best choice, but it's also a mess. And yeah, I think it's absolutely anybody's game. Vishy has a great track record against Shirov, so maybe he has a psychological advantage. But when it comes to calculating and attacking, there's very few people that can compete with Alexei Shirov. Vishy, of course, being one of them, but I'm saying Shirov is going to be in his element here, and I don't think he's that worried that the computer maybe gives 0-50 in white's favor. It's just a messy position, which Vishy has invited by going C4. I'm still a fan of this knight jump. Just getting rid of that dude or that dude. Just get rid of something, especially get rid of your own dumb piece. Which Vishy has done by going C4, DC, knight E4, but that created this weakness on D3. I don't know. In practice, I think black is doing quite alright here. In practice, I think both Aronia and Giri are doing quite alright. Let's see if there's potential for play there. Giri has played bishop D3 immediately. I'm surprised by that. I thought he should have started with king G7 to stop any knight f6 checks. But he did want to create opposite color bishops by going bishop E4, knight f6, king G7. And Levon came up with a little trick. Easy to miss, at least I would have missed it. Knight to D5, very nice move. Destroying the black coordination, attacking both bishops, so there's no choice. But takes, E takes D, rook takes D3, and now this pawn is hanging. Giri had to play D4, but this is a slightly different story than all these other opposite color bishop endings I was talking about earlier. Takes. Here white is better. Here white has this majority, and the black passed pawn is really not worth anything. Levon's played king E2, he was gonna put his king on D3. This pawn does nothing but restricting his own pieces, his bishop and his rook. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Giri gave it up voluntarily by playing D3, because if white gets time here, let's make some normal moves. Rook C8, king D3, let's say H5, bishop, wherever, it doesn't really matter. Bishop E4, A5, stabilize the position. White will chip away and either go rook F1, H3, G4, F5 1 point, find a way to activate his rook, take this D4 pawn at an opportune moment. In a rapid game, this is very, very unpleasant to defend. It's a dead draw if you remove the rooks, or a draw at the very least. But with the rooks on board, and this rook might look nice on the c-file, but doesn't have any entry squares, this is suffering for black. So Giri missed this knight d5 trick and now is under pressure. Levon Aronian gets rewarded for his fighting spirit that he found a way to continue the game earlier with his move knight to g3. Giri made a mistake with the rushed bishop d3 and now has to defend a very unpleasant position, which of course he's good at. He's played f6, starting to exchange more pawns. White should go king d3, fe, which still gives white an edge. These positions might look equal at first sight, but it's not easy, mainly because this bishop is much worse than this bishop, because this bishop on e7 is restricted by his own pawn, while the white pawn is full-fledged passed pawn. The white king is better than the black king. Might still end in a draw, but white has serious pressure here, and black has to be very, very careful. What's going on in the Nakamura-Kramnik game? I've called this a draw like a move ago, but after rook c5, rook 8 d7, Nakamura's played knight a3. And since I have a computer running right now, the computer is getting very excited about rook d2 here. What did they miss? Maybe Nakamura missed, but this would be very out of character. That after rook c2, knight takes g2 is a legal move. Sometimes you think, okay, my rook is guarding along the second rank, but rooks can't jump, so knight takes g2 looks more or less winning for black. This is very strange. Maybe it's a transmission error. Let's see if I can have a look at the board there. But yeah, my best explanation is that knight a3, rook d2. He wanted to go rook c2, keeping everything under control. And sometimes you forget that this is a legal move. White sort of controls the square twice and black only once, but you still can't go king takes g2 or rook takes g2. I don't know, would be a very out of character mistake by Nakamura, who almost never makes such tactical mistakes. But if this is correct, and yeah, if my computer is correct, which tends to be, computers are quite good at this stuff, black is pretty much winning here after rook d2, which would be shocking turnaround. That escalated quickly. And yeah, instead of knight a3, that's the position I was calling a draw earlier, even though maybe white has to be a little more careful. Maybe play any move, whatever. That doesn't allow rook d2, rook c3, or rook b5 back. It should end peacefully. So if we can trust that this knight went here, then Kramnik now has a golden one-move ticket in rook to d2. Not a hard move to think of, and I really don't know what Nakamura wants to do. I still think the most likely is a temporary brain freeze after rook c2. He did not spot that knight g2 was a legal move. Giri's played rook c8, occupying the open file. And I believe Levan Aronian is not going to be in any hurry to take on d4. Here, if you take on d4, you allow rook c2, and also aesthetically, you do give this bishop a little more freedom of movement. This pawn on d4 really does nothing good for black. It actually gives shelter to the white king. It can't get checked on the d file. The king is doing very well guarding this square. It restricts the black bishop. So I would expect Levon to play a move like rook f1 or rook e1, trying to improve his position slightly. Draw is still a favorite. I'm not claiming white is winning here. I'm just saying these endgames with rooks still on the board and opposite color bishops, they can be deceptively tricky. Let's see what Vishy did. And yeah, if there's ever a camera on the Nakamura Kramnik game, holla at me and I'll be very interested to see if knight a3 was really played. By the way, in the front row you can see former world champion Anatoly Karpov visiting the event, checking out the action. Still a very strong player, of course. Anatoly Karpov doesn't play much, but once in a while he shows up in the German Bundesliga. Won a very nice game against Maxim Rothstein last season, if I recall correctly. So he can still play, especially rapid time controls. But he seems to be very comfortable watching the action there. There we have Sunil Viramantre on the right side. Hikaru Nakamura's, I don't know, stepfather, is that the fair description? I'm not 100% sure, but he's certainly rooting for Hikaru. And Hikaru might just have blundered. If, yeah, rook d2 is on the board, it seems like this is correct. I would love to get footage from that game, because I think, yeah, this is just one of these moments of temporary insanity where you think, no problem, rook c2, and I get everything covered. But you miss that there is no X-ray technology for rooks invented yet. Therefore, knight takes g2 just wins pretty much. Maybe wins is strong. We could continue this line a bit, but let's say takes, king g3, takes here, and g5. And black is a pawn up, and he's gonna transfer his knight. Oops, sorry. From g6 to f4. These should run much faster than the white pawns. Yeah, that line is on the board. Rook 1 c2, knight g2, and rook takes c7. What else can Kramnik do now? I think he has to take the pawn. If knight f4 check, for example, king g3. Now this rook does a good job covering the g2 square, so there's no rook g2 checkmate. After rook takes c7, white has to control his urge to go rook takes c7, because this would be checkmate. But if he takes on d2, now would be equal material. Black's still a little better because of his nice knight, but I do believe he should try to grab this pawn while he has a chance. King to g3. Now either takes or maybe g5 immediately, with a significant advantage. Still has to be one, but it looks very grim for white. So this might be one of these very rare games where, Yeah, Hikaru Nakamura just missed something simple. Don't see that much. Let's check back in with Vichy and Alexei Shirov, who played a World Championship match or a Knockout World Championship final. When was it? 2002? I'm not sure if it was 2002. I believe early 2000s, which Vichy won very convincingly, something like 3.5 half. He's always had a good score against Shirov, but in this game they're playing Shirovian chess so far. Like Vichy, of course, also comfortable in complications, and Vichy also very comfortable defending and taking a slightly quote-unquote ugly position where he is material up. He doesn't mind like having to make some moves to stay in the game if there is a material price for it. But it looks dangerous. Vichy's tried to take on f4, gf4 and knight g5, hinting at ideas like queen h5, also keeping control of the e6 square, and sometimes you just want to go back to f3. So I like this maneuver because you also want to stop black from getting too active with f3. Shirov concludes his development with bishop f5, queen d5, c6 and queen a5. Very surprising maneuver. The queen looks a little dim on the rim, but he wants to attack the e5 knight. I would guess Shirov can just try to block it out with b5. Also stabilizing his c4 pawn. Now this queen is a little off guard. Probably come back into the game via c7. But whew, this could go either way and very quickly. Like the price of one move is extremely high. For example, you go here, not a very good idea because of rook takes e5, queen takes e5, knight f7 and white wins. If b5, what does white do though? I thought this, but then after rook c8, the queen cannot keep contact with the knight on e5. And something like this is just nothing you want to play. So I'm not sure what the best move is. Rook a1 looks natural as well. But black has a lot of potential in his position. Let's say here, here and here. And all of a sudden, all black pieces are operating at full capacity. This bishop still has to get out of the way, but could very well be dangerous for the white king and something like this. So very unbalanced position. The computer just gives 0-0, but that doesn't help us very much. Anything can happen. It is incredibly sharp. Shirov has played b5, which is a very logical move. Boxing this queen out, overprotecting the c4 pawn. And it is a mess. What else can you do? Rook 81 looks very natural. You could go queen d2, but I don't think you wanna. You wanna sort of try to use this queen's effect for the greater good. And yeah, Vichy's played rook 81. And the line I was looking at, once again, this is a computer line, I'm not going to pretend I calculate all this stuff, is the move queen e7, which looks very strong. It's not obvious because you step into this pin. It's important to include the rook, and you don't want to trade that rook. As a rule, if your opponent has two rooks and you only have one rook, you don't want to trade your one rook, you want to use it somewhere else. Because imagine the rook on e1 and the rook on a8 were gone, then all of a sudden white would be winning pretty much with his super active rook. So you don't want to exchange that one rook you have, because that greatly enhances the strength of the remaining rook, if that makes sense. Queen e7 has been played. Shirov is playing well. If knight e4, rook g8, I like black's chances, at least optically. I was wondering if you can go knight f3 here, but it seems like black just takes and has time to give a check here. King h1. Now might even have time to grab this pawn on b2. Introducing the idea of rook g8 as well. I don't know. Sorry to scare you Vichy fans out there, but this looks like a very hard position to play with white. Well, it's easier to play with black. It's always easier to be the attacker than the defender here. Go rook g8, put this bishop somewhere and see what happens. So yeah, could go either way, but I like black's chances right now. And as mentioned, can't change any move. What happened in Nakamura-Kramnik? Looks like Kramnik did not take the pawn. He went knight e3 check instead. He's here, sorry. He prefers to play this 4 against 3 position instead of giving white a passed pawn. And he's probably evaluated that this is winning for him. Rook f2, king g3, little subtlety, forcing the king to a worse square. Rook takes b2. And now there's a little threat which you have to address, which is, let's say, this. It's a very nice checkmate. So Nakamura had to defend against that, but to do so he had to go passive with his rook. Rook to c1. And I'm no Kramnik when it comes to evaluating these endgames, but I have a feeling black should be winning here on account of his extra pawn and his much better pieces. If this knight ever gets to f4, it's pretty much game over. And there might be a forcing way to do so. Check. Rook a2, hitting this rook, hitting this knight, sorry, knight anywhere. And knight to g2. There is no defense against knight f4 check. There is probably a defense against the mate, but whenever this knight makes it here, the end is near. Rook g2 is mate, there's knight e2 checks. No, this looks like a vintage Kramnik endgame grind, but of course greatly helped by the fact that Nakamura had this temporary lapse with knight a3, allowing rook d2 and knight takes g2, which does not happen very often at this level, and especially not to Hikaru Nakamura. He's so attentive and so good at spotting all kinds of tactics. So Kramnik's gonna win, I believe. Aronian is still chipping away in that endgame. He has winning chances. I still think draw is a favorite, but as mentioned, white is significantly better, even though it might look equal at first sight. But white has a better king, better bishop, better rook you could argue about, but I would even say the better rook. And black faces an unpleasant defense here. Levon is going to keep playing for quite a bit. The big wild card is Anand Shirov, where currently I like Shirov's position because he can bring his rook into the action very quickly and start an attack. But my opinion can change very quickly, pretty much whenever the computer changes his opinion. But as mentioned, also the price of a move is very high here, and this position is very hard to play perfectly. I'm not even sure if objectively black is better right here, right now. Just feels like it's much easier to play with black. To go rook g8, get this bishop out of the way, look for tricks, while Vishy faces a tough defense here. Very interesting play by Shirov. Vishy's played knight e4, gotten out of the way, and rook g8 has been blitzed out. This is the obvious move. Always feels good to have your rook on the same file as the enemy king. It's not like there's direct tactics, but now white is to worry about stuff like, let me make a pass, stuff like knight f3 check, if g takes f3, bishop c3 check. This might actually not work yet because you can block this check while attacking the queen, but there is all these kinds of things to scare white, so you have to be very careful. Let's see what's going down in the Kramnik game. Rook takes b2, rook c1. He's played f5. He has not gone for that rook g2, rook a2 maneuver, which might give Nakamura a bit of a lifeline. Knight c4. The rook ending might be a draw. Not sure about any of these things, but it feels like here white has some drawing chances. If you go f4, king h3, rook f2, which looks nice because now knight e3, there's rook f3. But can white just take here is the question. Maybe not. Maybe here there's knight to f1, threatening this checkmate we've seen earlier with rook h2 check, and there's nothing but taking it. Takes. And this position, I wish I knew such things. Feels winning, but I'm not sure. And after I've been pointing out what great winning chances Levon Aronian has for quite a while, his game has ended in a draw. I'm very confused by that, and I might have to rethink everything I've ever learned about chess. After bishop c1, Levon just took on d4, bishop b2, rook c4, and offered a draw. Maybe he thought there were no serious winning chances anyway. I'm very confused. I thought he should go b3, and I still think he's better here. Maybe his rook got a little sidetracked there on a4. But yeah, I'm surprised that he doesn't grind this out. Still, solid draw by Anish Giri, even though he got into some trouble. And I thought Aronian had good winning chances there. The Nakamura game has gone down the line I was looking at with the forced exchange sacrifice, knight takes e5, knight f1, takes, king g2, rook a1, knight g6. And here, I'm not sure if this is winning. I'm not sure at all. Rook a2, king g1. No, you can't go king h3 because rook f2 pins you down, ties you down. So king g1 on the board. And now it looks like white is getting this pawn. Let's say king f7, knight takes f4, g6. I have a hunch this might actually be a draw. And yeah, this is on the board. I'm really not sure. It looks like white should go knight g2, king h2, king g3, something like that, and then do nothing. The problem is whenever this king approaches, this knight is going to jump into f4 and have counterplay against the g6 pawn. So if Nakamura manages to save this, that would be an amazing achievement. Yeah, he's played knight g2. I don't know. I'm sure there's winning chances, but I have a feeling this is a draw. Which, yeah, would be really big escape. And Kramnik missing at least one clear win. In this position, he had this maneuver, which just decides the issue. I believe rook g2, check, king h3, rook a2, get out of the way with tempo. Then knight g2, followed by knight f4. And it's pretty much game over. Well, the position I have now, I'm sure Kramnik's going to try, but my feeling is it's a draw. Put the king on g3, put the knight on f4, then do nothing, jump around, jump to h3, jump back to f4, jump to g5 if you must. In general, just stay in touch. Not with the Kardashians, but with the g6 pawn. This is a draw. Wow. Big save from Nakamura after one of his very rare blunders. I believe that's what happened with knight a3. He blundered the g2 pawn. And to survive that against endgame wizard Vladimir Kramnik, not an easy thing to do. Let's see how the Anand Shirov game is developing. Vishy, after rook g8, went for knight d6. Always nice to have the option of a smothered mate, even though it's not really in the cards right here, right now. And Shirov went bishop c2. Oh, is this winning material? Wow, hang on. Bishop c2. If rook d2, I'm guessing there is this trick now finally working. Gf3. And yeah. Too many problems in the white position. Takes. Everything's hanging, so you can't do that. Therefore, after bishop c2, you could not move this rook, because of rook c1, there's also trouble with queen takes d6. Vishy had to give the exchange with queen d2, bishop takes d1, queen takes d1, which means now, let's do a quick pawn count. Black is one pawn up and has an active position. Shirov has good winning chances. Once again, opposite color bishops, which favor the attacker, so it remains to be seen who's gonna beat the attacker. But this bishop is a little passive. If you could magically transport this bishop onto this diagonal, things would be different, but not gonna be able to do it because black has such a good pawn chain restricting the white bishop. No, Shirov is significantly better here. And yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier. This position, even though objectively maybe it's not great for black, even though maybe it is, who knows, but it's much harder to play with white because you have to be so careful. And now, yeah, black has a serious advantage and Vishy is gonna have to dug in and defend, just like Hikaru Nakamura seems to have managed to do, even though Kramnik keeps pushing for a win. Knight f4, king d4 is using the little trick that knight g6 drops the knight after rook g1 check, so you can't take, but you can go, let's say, knight d5, restricting this king from coming to e3, and then keep attacking the g6 pawn at the next opportunity. You can also probably go king g2, just to renew the threat of knight takes g6. No, I think it's a draw. By the way, if you're wondering why there's no player interviews on this show, the reason is that I'm in Hamburg, not in Zurich, and I'm getting the video feed remotely. But if you switch to the German feed with my Grandmaster colleague Yannick Pelletier and International Master Werner Hug, they will have some of the players stopping by and talking to them in English. So feel free to check out that German feed live on site from Zurich. If you're wondering, is Levon Aronian there? I'm wondering, I don't know, I don't have it open here, but you can keep an eye on the German feed to see if there's any player interviews. I'm sure someone's gonna mention it in the chat as well, and I won't be mad if you go away for a little bit and then come back. Slightly mad, not too mad. Vichy's fans are still optimistic. They're saying time trouble, Vichy's gonna win this. There is not a lot of time left. Shirov has 50 seconds, but you do get 10 seconds per move, so it's hard to lose on time. Still, anything can happen. However, Shirov has a very good starting position with an extra pawn. He's thrown in a little f3, not sure about that. g3, rook d8, but it's always nice, especially strong players. They really like having pawn on f3 or h3 close to the enemy king. And yeah, Vichy faces a tough defense here. Rook d8, he has to put his queen somewhere at c1 or c2. When Shirov has a choice if he wants to activate his queen. This looks quite tempting actually. Hitting the rook, and if the rook goes here, let's say takes. You gotta be a little careful with your back rank, but maybe you can, even though this looks scary, maybe you're just in time to hide the king here. The main culprit is the white bishop, which is so passive, but this looks very dangerous. Now this bishop could enter the action. Nah, I'm sorry, I'm making random moves and ruining poor Shirov's position. Let's see if he can do better. Yeah, he's avoided the exchange of rooks, probably doesn't want to weaken his back rank, and he's gone knight to d3 after queen to c1. Vichy didn't play queen c2, but queen c1. Now Shirov went for this fork, so there's no choice but takes, bishop takes, pawn takes. Shirov now. This looks a bit like a face. Pawns on d3, knight on e4. Looks like ice to me, but nah, I'm not sure anybody else can see it. I'm probably going slightly mad. The question is, can you go queen takes c2, queen takes c6, allow d2? I think you can, because after rook d1, the queen defends the knight, and there is no immediate tactic that promotes this pawn. So it does seem possible. Maybe Shirov just has to continue grabbing pawns after bishop b2. I'm sure that's what Vichy is calculating right now. Can I grab this pawn? I would really like to take it before it shows up on c4 and reinforces his brother Delroy. Is he gonna do it? Let's check the camera. I haven't been looking on the camera for a while. At the camera. To the camera. I haven't been studying the feet for a while. Vichy once again wearing his checkered light blue shirt. This is my favorite Vichy shirt. I think he should, yeah, wear it every day, or get a couple of those and wear them every day. And he did take on c6. After carefully checking that d2, rook d1 holds, which it does. So now Shirov probably should snag the pawn on b2. Shirov doesn't have a lot of time, and maybe the trend is slightly turning in Vichy's favor again. He's activated his queen after bishop b2. I guess black is still better, but all of a sudden the white position feels a little easier to play than a couple moves ago. Kramnik in the meantime is trying his last chance, but this is just a draw. Amazing survival job by Hikaru Nakamura. So we're gonna stay with Anna Shirov. Battle of the 90s, even though both these guys, of course, still very strong, but they've been battling each other since the 90s. Anna played the World Championship match against Garry Kasparov in 95. Shirov beat Kramnik in 98 in their World Championship qualifier match. Of course, never got to play Kasparov. Well documented story, that one. And Shirov played the best move, bishop takes b2. Here's some aggressive cleaning outside. It looks like on Sunday they're cleaning up the whole office. Wasn't me. I don't think anybody knows I'm here. I'm just hiding away in the studio, close the door. And they often get freaked out, like the cleaning ladies or the security guards. But they're not shy, they're approaching. Scary. So apologies for that sound. What's going on in this game? King to f1. Shirov offered an exchange of queen. Queen d7, which cannot be declined because queen h3, queen g2 would be checkmate. So Vichy took, takes, and rook d1. Let's first count pawns. Black is a pawn up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, versus 4. He has a bishop against a knight, which is supposed to be an advantage with pawns on both sides of the board. So if he can keep this pawn alive, which he probably can, I think he's played rook d5 already, to stop knight c5, knight d2, and now he started to push his queen side. Shirov might be close to winning here. b4, knight takes f3, restoring material equality. But the problem is that the black army just coordinates so well. Bishop c3, attending a5, a4. Actually, the computer only gives black a very small advantage, so my assessment might be way off. To me, this looks horribly scary for black. Anyway, let's catch up with the game. Knight to e1 has been played by Vichy, forcing this pawn forward. d2, knight to f3 back. And rook to a5, going after the a-pawn, trying to create connected passed pawns. And the trouble is here with bishop against knight, knight d2, rook a2, knight e4. The bishop tends to be stronger in such situations. But once again, this is all my book smarts. The computer says this is an equal position after knight to e4. And it looks like Vichy did in fact manage to survive this, which is amazing, really. I'm pretty sure he must have been lost somewhere here. But maybe not. Computer doesn't say so. Knight e4, a5. Shirov does not dare to keep the bishop alive, maybe afraid of some mating attacks over here as well. a5, knight c3, bc, rook c1. And now the question is white actually winning? I would not be that surprised if white was better here. Because long term, if white manages to stabilize, keep this and get one of the queenside pawns, he will have a winning advantage. These 3 against 1 always wins, even with one passed pawn here. And therefore Shirov has to try to keep these pawns alive and coordinate, but rook a3 is such an ugly move. King e2, a4. Now Vichy should have time to go. I'm trying to count. Rook c2, rook b3, king d3, a3. I was going to say rook takes c3, but it doesn't work because of a2. But if you do something else here, king c4, let's say. Black is just in time. This is on the board, and here Shirov has the resource a2. Let's see if he comes up with this a2. Rook takes a2 forced, and rook to b2, when I think he's just in time to make a draw. Because you can't take here or here, therefore white has to go rook a8 check, or rook a3 or whatever. Yeah, he spotted a2, takes and rook b2. Good job by Shirov. Rook a8 check, king g7, and now white can't keep his whole king side alive, and therefore I'm not sure if the game is over already or if the players are taking a little break. Therefore it should be a draw, but I'm not sure what happened there. It looks like they're leaving and they've agreed to a draw. Both sides will be unhappy. Vichy close to win in that rook endgame, and Shirov close to win a couple times before that. Vichy didn't look very pleased that Shirov escaped there, but I think earlier he was on the verge of disaster a few times. So hard-fought draw between the two old rivals, Shirov and Anand. And Nakamura could catch Anand by beating Vladimir Kramnik. That's not going to happen, however, but Nakamura will pull off a true Houdini job, even though his move Knight a3 was not really a Houdini job or a stockfish job. Instead, in fact, all the entrants started yelling at him for allowing this rook d2. So he did blunder, but he did survived that endgame against Vladimir Kramnik. Kramnik missed a couple of wins, the most obvious one, the one I've been showing. Rook a2, this is key. Winning a tempo, so white doesn't have time to go back to g3. Knight anywhere, and knight g2, knight f4. Wins the house. The position they have now, ignorant as I am, I said it's just a draw. It might still be tricky to defend with white. If you go here, for example, this rook goes back. This h-pawn could be tricky to deal with. But I thought you could just go to h4 and try to attack it. Probably Nakamura is worried about some construction like this, which should be a draw, but with this knight on the rim, sometimes you could get in trouble here. But now he's played it. King h4, rook g2, knight g3 is on the board. Kramnik's gonna try this king f4, I believe. The alternative would be to give a check and go h4, but that also allows the white pawns to advance information. And you can't queen the h-pawn by itself. For example, here you go king g4, rook h1, you go king g3. Other moves are possible, but just to illustrate the theme, h2, you go king g2, and this is a draw. So I think Kramnik's gonna try king f4. Oh no, he's played rook h2. That's a surprise. He's played rook h2, king g5. Maybe he thinks he can repeat with rook g2. No, he's gone h4. Wow. Allowing f4 check. Does he want to go king d4? That allows an immediate draw. Knight f5, king e4, rook h4. But king e6 does not look like a winning attempt either. I think he's gonna go king d4 and... No, he goes king e6. He is a much braver man than me. But I still think the line I was showing is correct. Knight f5, h3, and the king just follows this pawn. King g4 or king h4. There is no winning chances yet. King g4 has been played by Nakamura. No, this is just a draw. And time for Kramnik to simplify to 1 with rook f2 or rook e2. Nah, Kramnik can never lose, so it's not really... Oh, rook e2 you probably shouldn't do, by the way, because of knight d4. And a fork. I'm very good at blundering these last minute knight forks. Kramnik's played rook h1. Nakamura has a choice between knight g3, hitting the rook. And if the rook goes anywhere, you could pick up the pawn. Or just this textbook method of going king g3, staying close to this pawn. Both lead to a draw, but knight g3 is the most direct way to do it. Nakamura taking his time here, taking his black pawn, taking his red bull to study the options, but knight g3, rook h2, and he doesn't even repeat moves. Instead, he pushes e5, saying, you know what, if you want to keep pushing your luck, you might lose this. I will advance my pawns. There is absolutely no winning chance for Vladimir Kramnik, so I'm a bit curious if he's trying to overstretch his position here, but now he's gone rook f2, showing I'm not gonna let these pawns advance any further. Oops. Knight e4. Okay, once again giving him a chance to blunder with h2, knight f2. Not gonna happen. Knight e4, rook g2, check. And king takes h3, which officially is the end of white's problems, of black's winning attempts, and I believe the players have agreed to a draw after any move, let's say rook g8, followed by king f5. These pawns would fall, and Vladimir Kramnik very upset about the wins he missed. Hikaru probably upset about his earlier blunder, but he's gotta be happy that he managed to survive this. As mentioned, the big blunder in this game was the move knight a3 in a roughly equal position, allowing rook d2, and I think he missed rook c2. Knight takes g2, which sometimes you just have this brain freeze and you forget that the rook is not an x-ray. It's not a very common theme. But after that, Kramnik, especially with f5, made his life much more difficult than he had to be, and then great defense by Hikaru Nakamura. Game of the round for me was Anand against Shirov, where the advantage kept changing. Not perfect computer play, but just great fighting chess between those two old rivals. And it looked like Shirov was getting the better of Vishy Anand, but Vishy Anand tricky, cool, calm, collected as he is, managed to not only hold this very, very dangerous looking endgame. I won't have time for a deep analysis, but I'd be shocked if black wasn't much better somewhere around here. a5, king g7, whatever. But after knight e4, a5, Shirov even had to be very, very careful to survive this. And here I would not be too shocked if white was better. Rook c2, rook b3, but Shirov was just in time after a3, after a3, king c4 to simplify with a2. This is the important finesse, because if you go rook b2, king c3, I think you're losing this. But he had a2, rook takes a2, rook b2. This rook can't be taken, and therefore it will feast along the second rank and forces a draw. Third game of the round was a draw between Aronian and Giri. I thought Aronian was a little better after Giri allowed this knight f6, knight d5 maneuver, but maybe I was overstating white's winning chances against a top defender like Anish Giri. He held this position without particular drama. So 3 draws. There we see the analysis of the Nakamura-Kramnik game still ongoing. I'm gonna be back at, when will I be back? At 6 p.m. with round number 4 of the Rapid event. If you want to see player interviews, check out the German stream. Click on the little German flag. I believe 1 or 2 of the players might show up, give their comments, their thoughts on what happened in the game. For now, both Kramnik and Nakamura look disappointed now, but there Nakamura is smiling. He's saying, yeah, you know, I played terribly, but I am a tough defender. You could not hurt me, Vladi, even though you're showing all these wins you missed now. You gotta show them over the board. And Kramnik can't believe I am an endgame magician and I missed something like rook g2, king h3, rook a2. Rook a2, Vladimir. Or rook e2 is what he's showing. Rook a2 even better. Both guys, yeah, reminiscing. In the tournament, Vishy maintains his lead 1 point since double run. Rapid games count double. 1 point ahead of Hikaru Nakamura, who is 1 point ahead of Vladimir Kramnik. And yeah, Aronian, Giri and Shirov yet to win a game, but there is 2 rounds left and then there's a Blitz tournament left. So everything can still happen. Vishy Anand stays in the lead. Thank you guys for watching. I'll be back at 6 p.m. with round number 4 of the Zurich Rapid Chess Challenge. If your better half says, you know what, I don't really care about this Valentine's Day. It's a bit of a fake holiday. Why don't you enjoy watching a bit of chess? I'd be happy to see you guys back in a little less than 75 minutes, or more or less 75 minutes. So see you guys then. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.